A winding mountain road. A fleeting moment where a single choice changes everything. In today's tale, a high-flying millionaire, lost in a world of wealth, faces a near-fatal crash, only to be saved by a humble potter whose hands shape more than clay. Through her gentle strength, he rediscovers what it means to truly live, carving a love that outshines any fortune. What secrets does her rustic cabin hold? And how does a simple clover pendant unlock a journey to the soul? Join us to find out. If this story stirs your heart, subscribe to never miss a tale that might just shift your world. Drop a comment. Where are you listening from? Let's weave this journey together. Now, settle in, and let's step into a story where love blooms in the stillness. The mountain road twisted like a serpent through the late summer forest, its narrow path hemmed by towering oaks on one side and a yawning, misty valley on the other. Sunlight filtered through the canopy, dappling the asphalt in fleeting gold, but the air held a restless edge, as if the world itself sensed the storm brewing. Theo Langston, his dark hair swept back from a furrowed brow, gripped the wheel of his sleek Tesla Model S, its electric hum a faint undercurrent to the chaos in his ears. His phone, propped on the dashboard, crackled with the urgent voice of a board member, her words sharp and insistent. "Theo, the Milan deal's teetering. They're demanding your input now, or we lose the contract." Theo's jaw tightened, his steel-gray eyes flicking between the winding road and the glowing screen, where emails piled up like a digital landslide. "I'll be there in an hour," he snapped, his voice clipped, honed by years of commanding boardrooms. "Just keep them talking." The road curved sharply, demanding his focus, but his mind was a battlefield of figures and strategies, the weight of his jewelry empire pressing against his temples. He was Theodore Langston, the man who turned raw gemstones into million-dollar dreams, whose name adorned boutiques from Paris to Tokyo. Failure wasn't a word he allowed in his vocabulary, yet the pressure of this deal gnawed at him, a rare crack in his polished armor. He adjusted his tie, the silk feeling like a noose, and accelerated, the Tesla surging forward with silent power. The forest blurred past, a green and gold smear, as he mentally rehearsed his pitch to the Milan buyers. Each word, a carefully cut diamond. Then, in a heartbeat, the world shattered. A flash of white fur darted across the road, a rabbit, small and reckless, bounding from the underbrush. Instinct seized Theo's hands before reason could. He cursed under his breath, jerking the wheel hard to the right. The Tesla's tires screamed, clawing at the asphalt as the car spun, its sleek frame fishtailing on loose gravel. The valley loomed, a gaping maw of mist and shadow, its depths promising no mercy. "No, no!" Theo shouted, his heart slamming against his ribs, a primal fear drowning out the board member's frantic voice, now shrieking through the phone. "Theo! Theo, what's happening?" The dashboard glowed red with warnings. Traction control failing as the car skidded sideways, its rear tires slipping off the road's edge. The Tesla tilted, gravity pulling it toward the abyss, and Theo's breath caught, his mind flashing to a single, absurd regret. Not the deal, not the empire, but the four-leaf clover pendant his mother gave him, now tucked against his chest, the only piece of her he still carried. Half a mile away, Marissa Mara Hale was loading clay pots onto the bed of her battered pickup, her dark hair tied back with a scrap of twine, her hands dusted with the earthy grit of her trade. The air smelled of pine and promise, and she hummed softly, a tune her grandmother once sang, as she arranged the pots for delivery to a neighbor's market stand. Mara was no stranger to these mountains, their rhythms as familiar as her own heartbeat. She lived simply, her days filled with the spin of her pottery wheel and the quiet needs of her community, glazing a bowl for a widow, mending a fence for an elderly couple. Her cabin, nestled in a clearing, was her sanctuary. its walls lined with the work of her hands, each piece a story of patience and care. The screech of tires sliced through her melody, sharp and wrong, like a needle skipping on a record. Mara froze, her hazel eyes narrowing as she pinpointed the sound. Up the road, where the cliffs grew steep. Dropping a crate, she sprinted, her boots pounding the dirt path, her breath steady despite the fire in her lungs. She rounded a bend and saw it, a silver Tesla, half off the road, its rear tires dangling over the edge, the valley waiting to claim it. The car teetered, a breath from disaster, its nose inches from plunging into the void. Mara didn't hesitate. Her eyes scanned the scene, sharp and practical, landing on a sturdy oak beam leaning against a nearby fence. Part of a repair she'd planned for tomorrow. She grabbed it, muscles straining under its weight, and ran to the car, gravel crunching beneath her feet. The Tesla groaned, metal creaking as it shifted. With a grunt, she wedged the beam under the car's undercarriage, leveraging it against a jutting rock on the road's inner slope. The wood bit into the earth, holding fast, and the car shuddered, stabilized, its descent halted. Mara exhaled, her hands trembling but steady, and yanked open the driver's door. Inside, Theo was slumped against the seat, unconscious, a shallow cut on his forehead trickling blood, his right arm bruised from the impact. Mara knelt beside him, her fingers finding his pulse, strong if rapid. "Hey, stay with me," she murmured, her voice low and calm, a beacon in the chaos. She checked his pupils, noting the cut, the bruise, but no signs of worse damage. The sun was sinking fast, painting the cliffs in hues of fire, and the nearest clinic was hours away, the roads treacherous after dusk. There was no time to wait. With a gentleness that belied her strength, Mara slid her arms under Theo, lifting him from the wreck. He was heavier than she expected, his tailored suit a stark contrast to her worn flannel, but she carried him to her truck, laying him across the passenger seat. She draped a wool blanket over him, tucking it around his shoulders, and climbed into the driver's seat. The engine coughed to life, and she drove, the road unspooling toward her cabin, a wooden haven nestled in a clearing, its chimney puffing soft smoke against the twilight. Mara carried Theo inside, the door creaking as she stepped into the warmth of her home. The air was thick with the scent of clay and lavender, the glow of a crackling fireplace casting shadows across shelves of hand-glazed pots and vases. She laid him on a quilt-covered couch, its faded patterns soft under the firelight, and knelt beside him. With warm water and a clean cloth, she cleaned the cut on his forehead, bandaging it with care, her hands moving with the same precision she brought to her pottery. She set a mug of chamomile tea on a nearby table, its steam curling in the air, and adjusted the quilt, ensuring he was warm. The cabin hummed with quiet life, the faint cluck of chickens outside, the pop of burning logs, the steady rhythm of her own breath. Mara stepped back, her hazel eyes lingering on Theo's face, now softened in unconsciousness, the lines of stress eased by sleep. "You're safe now," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the fire's crackle. She turned to stoke the flames, adding a log, and glanced out the window at the darkening forest. The mountains kept their secrets, but tonight, they'd entrusted her with a stranger's life. She didn't know his name, his story, or the weight he carried, but in this moment, none of that mattered. He was here, and she would keep him safe. The first rays of morning slipped through the wooden slats of Mara Hale's cabin, casting golden threads across the quilt that draped Theodore Langston's still form. The air was soft with the scent of clay and lavender, underpinned by the faint smokiness of last night's fire, now reduced to glowing embers. Theo stirred, a dull throb pulsing in his temples, his right arm stiff with bruising. His eyes fluttered open, taking in the unfamiliar ceiling, rough-hewn beams, not the sleek lines of his penthouse. The silence was jarring, unbroken by the hum of his phone or the city's restless pulse. He reached for his pocket, fingers fumbling, only to find his phone lifeless, its screen dark. "Where am I?" he muttered, voice hoarse, as he sat up slowly, the quilt slipping to reveal a room that felt like a relic from another time. Shelves lined with hand-glazed pots, a pottery wheel tucked in a corner, and a table bearing a cooled mug of chamomile tea, all alien to his world of glass and chrome. Frustration flared, sharp and familiar. Theo was a man who controlled outcomes, who turned chaos into profit. Yet here he was, stranded in a wooden box with no signal, no Wi-Fi, no tether to the empire he'd built. He swung his legs off the couch, wincing as his bruised arm protested, and called out, "Hello? Anyone here?" The door creaked open, and Mara stepped in, her dark hair loosely tied, her hands dusted with clay from her morning work. She wiped them on a towel, her hazel eyes calm but assessing. "No signal out here," she said, preempting his question. "Doctor's coming in a few hours. You'll be fine." Her voice was steady, unhurried, a stark contrast to the urgency that defined Theo's life. "This is insane," Theo snapped, standing too quickly, his head spinning. "I've got meetings, contracts, people waiting." Mara didn't flinch, her gaze unwavering as she set a tray on the table. Fresh bread, scrambled eggs, and a jar of homemade blackberry jam, its deep purple glinting in the light. "Eat," she said simply. "You'll need your strength." Theo opened his mouth to protest, but his stomach betrayed him, growling at the scent of warm bread. Pride battled hunger, and hunger won. He sat, picking up a slice, its crust crisp yet yielding. The first bite was a revelation. Earthy, honest, nothing like the artisanal nonsense he paid for in the city. He ate in silence, the warmth of the meal softening the edges of his anger. Though he wouldn't admit it, Mara moved about the cabin with quiet purpose, stoking the fire, adjusting a vase on a shelf. Theo watched her, his irritation mingling with reluctant curiosity. She was unlike anyone in his orbit. No deference, no agenda, just a woman who seemed to belong to this place as much as the pines outside. As he finished eating, she knelt beside him, checking the bandage on his forehead with deft fingers. "You don't need to do that," he said stiffly, pulling back. "I'm not helpless." Mara's lips twitched, a faint smile. "I know," she said gently. "But your arm's bruised, and you're not used to slowing down." She adjusted a cushion behind him, her touch practical yet kind, and Theo found himself at a loss, unaccustomed to care without expectation. Restless, he stood and paced to the window, the forest beyond a tapestry of green and gold. Mara had slipped outside, her figure visible through the open door, kneeling in a garden plot, her hands working the soil with the same care she'd shown him. Theo's world, boardrooms, deadlines, the Milan deal, felt like a distant dream, unreachable in this pocket of stillness. He stepped onto the porch, the floorboards creaking under his borrowed boots, and followed the sound of her humming to an open-air shed where a pottery wheel spun lazily. Mara was shaping a vase, her fingers coaxing the clay into smooth curves, her focus absolute, yet serene. The sight stopped him, a quiet beauty in her precision, like a dance he'd never learned. "You do this every day?" he asked, leaning against a post, his voice softer now, curiosity overriding his earlier sharpness. Mara glanced up, her smile small but warm. "Most days," she said. "Clay's honest. It tells you what it wants if you listen." The words landed like a pebble in still water, rippling through Theo's thoughts. In his world, he forced outcomes, bending markets to his will. But here was a woman who spoke of listening, of yielding. "How do you know where to start?" he asked, stepping closer, drawn despite himself. Mara paused, her fingers tracing the vase's curve. "You feel it," she said. "Force it and it cracks. Let it guide you, and it becomes something real." Theo sat on a nearby bench, the wheel's rhythmic hum blending with the forest's whispers, birdsong, rustling leaves, the distant cluck of chickens. The knot in his chest, wound tight by years of ambition, began to loosen. He thought of his mother, her hands dusted with silver as she crafted jewelry, her quiet joy in creation. He'd buried that memory under spreadsheets and status, but Mara's words stirred it awake. "You make it sound simple," he said, almost to himself. Mara's eyes met his, steady and knowing. "It is, when you stop fighting it." The moment hung between them, fragile yet potent, until a breeze carried the scent of damp earth, breaking the spell. Mara returned to her work, and Theo watched, his phone forgotten in his pocket, its silence no longer a cage, but a strange kind of freedom. The forest's pulse was louder now, its rhythm sinking into him, and for the first time in years, he didn't feel the need to fill the quiet with noise. Mara's shed, with its clay-streaked tools and half-finished pots, was a world unto itself. And Theo, still a stranger here, felt its pull, a whisper of something he couldn't yet name. Outside, the sun climbed higher, bathing the clearing in light. Mara stood, brushing clay from her hands, and nodded toward the cabin. "Rest," she said, not a command but an invitation. Theo nodded, his earlier defiance dulled by the weight of her presence. As he walked back, the crunch of gravel under his boots felt grounding, real. The cabin welcomed him, its warmth a quiet embrace. And though he didn't know it yet, a seed had been planted in that stillness, one that would grow in the days to come, reshaping the man who thought he'd mastered everything but his own heart. The cabin's warmth lingered like a soft pulse as dusk settled over the mountains. But the air grew heavy, charged with the promise of rain. Theodore Langston stood on Mara Hale's porch, the creak of floorboards under his borrowed boots, a faint echo of the unease stirring in his chest. The forest beyond was a tapestry of deepening shadows, its whispers drowned by an approaching rumble, thunder rolling low across the peaks. Inside, the fire crackled, casting golden flickers across the clay-dusted shelves. But Theo's thoughts were restless, tethered to the city he'd left behind. The Milan deal, his empire's demands, loomed like ghosts. Yet Mara's quiet presence, her words about listening to the clay, had cracked open something he couldn't name. He turned back to the cabin, drawn to its stillness, unaware that the night would anchor him here longer than he'd planned. Rain began as a soft patter, tapping the tin roof like tentative fingers, then crescendoed into a relentless downpour, sheets of water blurring the world outside. Mara, unperturbed, moved through the cabin, lighting an oil lamp that bathed the room in a honeyed glow. Theo paced, his phone still useless, its blank screen a mockery of his control. "This can't be happening," he muttered, raking a hand through his dark hair. The doctor was due, his ticket out, but the storm's fury mocked his urgency. A sharp knock interrupted his thoughts, and Mara opened the door to a rain-soaked figure, an older man in a heavy coat, his medical bag dripping. "Dr. Ellis," Mara greeted, ushering him in. The doctor's examination was swift, his hands steady as he checked Theo's forehead and bruised arm. "Minor shock, some bruising. Nothing broken," he said, packing his bag. "You're lucky, son." But his next words landed like a blow. "Road's gone. Landslide 2 miles down. No way out till they clear it, maybe a day or two." Theo's jaw clenched, frustration surging. "You're joking," he snapped, standing too fast, his head spinning. "I've got a company to run. Do you know who I am?" Dr. Ellis raised an eyebrow, unmoved, but Mara stepped forward, her hazel eyes calm yet piercing. "You're someone who almost died," she said softly, her voice cutting through his anger like a blade through silk. "That's enough for now." The words stopped Theo cold, their truth disarming him. He sank onto the couch, the fight draining from his shoulders. Dr. Ellis left, his coat flapping in the storm, and Mara closed the door. The rain's roar, a steady backdrop. She handed Theo a mug of peppermint tea, its steam curling like a question. He took it, the warmth seeping into his palms, and watched as Mara settled at a wooden table, her hands shaping a small clay pot, her focus a quiet anchor. The storm raged, but the cabin held firm, its walls a refuge against the chaos outside. Theo's gaze drifted to Mara's work, the pot's curves emerging under her fingers, each movement deliberate, unhurried. "Who's that for?" he asked, his voice softer, curiosity nudging past his frustration. Mara didn't look up, her hands steady. "Mrs. Linden down the trail," she said. "Her old one broke last spring." Theo's lips twitched, a faint smile breaking through. In his world, gifts were strategic, diamonds for clients, watches for partners. But Mara's act was pure, rooted in care, not gain. The simplicity stirred something in him, a memory of his mother's hands, silver-dusted, crafting for love, not profit. The fire popped, and Theo shifted, the tea's warmth loosening his tongue. "My mother used to work like that," he said, almost to himself. She'd sit at her bench, shaping pendants, rings. Never said much, but you could feel her heart in every piece. He paused, the words heavy. "I lost that somewhere. It's all numbers now, deals, pressure." Mara nodded, her eyes still on the clay. "Clay's like a story," she said. "You shape it, it shapes you. Lose that and you're just spinning." Her words landed softly, but they cut deep, echoing the quiet he'd felt watching her in the shed. Later, as Mara cleared the table, Theo noticed a pair of wool socks folded on a stool, a note in her neat script, "Warm feet, warm heart." He stared, a lump rising in his throat. No one in his world offered kindness without strings, yet here it was, simple and real. He pulled the socks on, their plush warmth easing the chill he hadn't realized he carried. The gesture, small yet profound, cracked his defenses further, and he found himself watching Mara as she tidied the cabin, her movements a quiet dance of purpose. That night, Mara served vegetable stew, its aroma mingling with the storm's damp breath. They ate in companionable silence, the clink of spoons against bowls, a soft counterpoint to the rain's drumbeat. Theo felt the cabin's rhythm seep into him, the fire's crackle, the roof's creak, the steady presence of the woman across from him. "You don't ask questions," he said suddenly, breaking the quiet. Mara looked up, her smile faint. "Don't need to," she said. "You'll tell me what matters when you're ready." Her trust, unearned yet freely given, was a weight and a gift, stirring a warmth he hadn't felt in years. As Mara washed the bowls, Theo stood by the window, the storm's fury a mirror to the turmoil he'd carried for so long. The city, with its relentless demands, felt like a distant planet, its pull weakening in the face of this place, this woman. He thought of the four-leaf clover pendant, his mother's last gift, still tucked against his chest, or so he hoped, the crash a blur in his memory. The thought of losing it tightened his chest, but Mara's voice broke through. "Rest," she said, nodding to the couch. "Storm's not done with us yet." Theo lay down, the quilt enveloping him, its weight grounding. The rain softened to a whisper, and the cabin's stillness wrapped around him like a lullaby. For the first time in years, his dreams were not of deals or deadlines, but of hands shaping clay, of a voice that spoke of stories, and a heart that saw beyond the man he'd become. The storm had stranded him, but in its shadow, something new was taking root, fragile yet fierce, in the quiet embrace of Mara's world. The storm had passed, leaving the mountain air crisp and sharp, scented with wet pine and promise. Dawn broke over Mara Hale's cabin, sunlight spilling through the windows to paint golden stripes across the quilt that still warmed Theodore Langston. He woke slowly, the absence of his phone's insistent buzz a strange relief, replaced by the soft trill of birds and the distant crow of a rooster. The cabin's quiet rhythm, Mara's words about clay and stories, the warmth of her unsolicited kindness had seeped into him, loosening the iron grip of his city life. Last night's stew, the wool socks with their handwritten note, had stirred something raw, a flicker of the man he'd buried under ambition. Theo rose, his bruised arm less tender, and pulled on one of Mara's oversized flannel shirts, its worn fabric oddly comforting against his skin. He stepped onto the porch, the floorboards cool under his bare feet, and inhaled deeply, the forest's pulse steadying his own. Beyond the clearing, Mara knelt in her garden, her dark hair catching the light as she worked the soil with calm precision, pulling weeds and turning earth. Theo watched, drawn to her unhurried focus, so unlike the frenetic pace he'd lived by. The landslide still blocked the road, trapping him here, but the urgency to escape had dulled, replaced by a curiosity he couldn't shake. He crossed the dewy grass, his boots sinking slightly, and stopped beside her. "I can help," he said, the words surprising him as much as they did her. Mara looked up, her hazel eyes glinting with amusement. "Sure. These plants can be judgy." Theo chuckled, a sound that felt foreign yet freeing, and crouched beside her, his hands hesitant as they touched the cool, damp soil. The earth was alive under his fingers, gritty and yielding, its scent of mint and basil rising in waves. Mara showed him how to pluck weeds without disturbing the herbs, her guidance patient, her voice a soft anchor. Theo's hands, accustomed to signing contracts and shaking hands, fumbled at first, but Mara's laughter, light, not mocking, eased his self-consciousness. "Not bad for a city boy," she teased, brushing dirt from her palms. When a thorn pricked his finger, drawing a thin bead of blood, Mara was there in an instant, pulling a cloth from her pocket and wrapping it with care. "Now you're a farmer," she said, her grin infectious. Her touch lingered, warm and steady, and Theo felt a spark, a quiet current that made his breath catch. He met her gaze, and for a moment, the world narrowed to the two of them, the garden a cocoon of possibility. Mara stood, dusting her hands, and nodded toward her pottery shed, nestled under a towering pine. "Come on," she said. "Let's try something different." Theo followed, the crunch of gravel grounding him as they entered the shed, its air thick with the scent of clay and sawdust. A half-finished vase sat on the wheel, its curves soft under the morning light. Mara handed him a lump of clay, its weight cool and heavy. "Design's design," she said, her tone matter-of-fact. "You shape diamonds, right?" "This isn't so different." Theo hesitated, staring at the clay, its formless potential daunting. "I work with platinum, gems," he murmured. "This is dirt." Mara's laugh was warm, unjudging. "Dirt that teaches patience, humility. Try it." She guided his hands to the wheel, her fingers brushing his, as she showed him how to center the clay, to feel its rhythm rather than force it. The wheel spun, slow at first, and Theo's touch was clumsy, the clay wobbling under his grip. "Easy," Mara said, her voice close, steadying him. "Let it lead." Their hands moved together, hers correcting his with gentle nudges, and the clay began to rise, a tentative form emerging. Theo's shoulders relaxed, the act of creation, so different from his calculated designs, pulling him into a quiet focus. When their fingers brushed again, neither pulled away, the contact a silent tether in the shed stillness. As the sun climbed, Mara stepped back, letting Theo work alone. He shaped a rough bowl, uneven but honest, and when he looked up, Mara was smiling, her eyes bright with approval. She reached for a small, glazed clay clover, its grooves delicate, and pressed it into his palm. "For your desk," she said simply. Theo stared at it, his throat tightening. The gift, like the socks, was unassuming yet profound, a reminder of a world where value wasn't measured in dollars. "I just function," he admitted, voice low, the words spilling out. "I wake up, perform, sell an image. I forgot what it means to just be." Mara held his gaze, her expression soft but unflinching. "You weren't made to just function, Theo. You were made to shine." The words pierced him, raw and true, echoing his mother's quiet belief in him, lost under years of ambition. He clutched the clover, its cool surface grounding him, and felt something shift, a crack in the armor he'd worn too long. Mara turned back to her wheel, giving him space, and Theo sat, watching the light play across her hands, the clay yielding to her touch. The shed hummed with life, the wheel's soft whir, the forest's distant song, and for the first time, Theo didn't feel the need to fill the silence with plans or power. That afternoon, they returned to the garden, harvesting basil and thyme, their movements falling into an easy rhythm. Theo's hands, still clumsy, grew surer under Mara's guidance, and her stories of neighbors, of pots gifted to children, wove a tapestry of community he'd never known. As the sun dipped, painting the sky in hues of amber, Theo realized he hadn't thought of the Milan deal all day. The city, with its glass towers and relentless demands, felt like a shadow, fading in the face of this place, this woman. Back in the cabin, Mara set out a simple lunch: fresh bread, eggs, and sliced apples. And they ate by the fire, the crackle of logs a soft backdrop. Theo's eyes lingered on her, the way her dark hair caught the firelight, the quiet strength in her hands. He thought of the four-leaf clover pendant, his mother's gift, and reached for it instinctively, relieved to feel its weight against his chest. But the crash's chaos gnawed at him. Had he lost it? The thought tightened his chest. But Mara's voice, asking if he wanted more tea, pulled him back. "You're thinking too hard," she said, half teasing. Theo smiled, the tension easing. "Maybe," he admitted, "but it's different here." As night fell, Theo lay under the quilt, the clay clover on the table beside him, its presence a quiet promise. The cabin's warmth, Mara's unwavering care, had planted a seed he couldn't ignore. Tomorrow, the road might clear, but tonight, he let himself sink into the stillness, the earth's heartbeat echoing his own, a step closer to the man he might yet become. The morning air hung heavy with fog, cloaking Mara Hale's cabin in a gauzy veil as the distant hum of a helicopter pierced the quiet. Theodore Langston stood in the cabin's doorway, his suitcase gripped tightly, the weight of departure pressing against his chest. The past days, Mara's gentle care, the clay clover in his pocket, the earth under his fingers, had stirred a longing he couldn't shake, a glimpse of a life unburdened by ambition. Yet the city called, its demands relentless, and the landslide's clearing signaled his return to the world he'd built. He glanced back at the cabin, its warmth lingering in the scent of pine and lavender, and felt a pang sharper than his bruises. The four-leaf clover pendant, his mother's last gift, was missing, lost in the crash's chaos. "I'll find it," Mara had promised, her hazel eyes steady as she stood in the clearing, her dark hair catching the mist. Theo nodded, throat tight. "Thank you," he said, voice low. "For everything." The helicopter's blades churned the air, rattling the cabin's tin roof as Theo climbed aboard, the suitcase bumping against his knee. As they lifted off, he pressed his face to the window, watching Mara grow smaller, her hand raised in quiet farewell, her figure rooted like the pines around her. The cabin shrank to a speck, swallowed by the forest, and Theo's chest ached with a loss he couldn't name. The city loomed ahead, its skyscrapers clawing the sky, and as the chopper descended, the familiar cacophony engulfed him, horns blaring, phones buzzing, his name flooding inboxes. He stepped into his downtown office, glass walls reflecting his tailored suit. But the space felt alien, its sterile edges pressing in. Assistants swarmed, thrusting tablets and schedules at him. But Theo's mind drifted to the cabin, to Mara's hands shaping clay, her voice saying, "You were made to shine." Days blurred into a frenzy of meetings, contracts, and the Milan deal's aftermath. Theo approved designs, signed deals, and placated clients. But each task felt hollow, like polishing a gem that had lost its fire. He stared at sketches of necklaces, their lines cold and lifeless, unable to summon the spark he'd once poured into his work. At night, in his high-rise penthouse, the bed was too vast, the silence too sharp. His hand reached for the absent pendant, finding only bare skin, and the void it left echoed the emptiness of his days. Mara's world, her garden, her shed, her quiet strength, haunted him, its simplicity louder than the city's clamor. A week later, a package arrived at his office, small and unassuming, wrapped in brown paper and tied with twine. The scent of pine clung to it, a whisper of the mountains. Theo's hands trembled as he carried it to his desk, shutting out the hum of his assistant's voice. He untied the twine, revealing a clay box, its surface glazed with intricate swirls. His name, Theo, etched in delicate script. His breath caught, and he lifted the lid. Nestled in soft linen was the four-leaf clover pendant, its silver gleaming unharmed. Tears pricked his eyes as he traced the box's grooves, each one a testament to Mara's care, her time, her heart. The pendant was more than a keepsake. It was a bridge to the man he'd glimpsed in her cabin, the man he wanted to be. He pressed the box to his chest, a decision crystallizing in the quiet. The next morning, Theo walked into a board meeting, the room buzzing with talk of the spring collection. Executives debated profit margins, their voices sharp, but Theo's mind was elsewhere. The clay box in his pocket, a steady weight. Halfway through a heated exchange, he stood, silencing the room. "I'm taking a leave," he said, his voice calm but firm. Ignoring their stunned faces, he walked out, leaving his tablet, his title, his world behind. He drove east, the Tesla humming as the city's skyline faded, the mountains rising like a promise. The clay box rested on the passenger seat, its lid slightly ajar, the pendant glinting in the sunlight. As the signal bars vanished from his phone, Theo welcomed the silence, his heart pounding with a clarity he hadn't felt in years. The cabin emerged through the pines, smoke curling from its chimney, the porch light a faint glow in the dusk. Mara stood by her kiln, her dark hair loose, her hands dusted with clay as she shaped a new pot. She looked up as Theo's car crunched the gravel, her hazel eyes lighting with a quiet joy, not surprise, as if she'd known he'd return. He stepped out, the air sharp with pine, and approached, the clay box in his hand. "I left something here," he said, his voice thick, the words carrying more than he could say. Mara's smile was soft, knowing. "I know," she replied, stepping closer, her presence a balm to the ache he'd carried. They sat by the fire, the crackle of logs filling the space where words weren't needed. The cabin's warmth enveloped them, its shelves of pots and vases a testament to Mara's life, now a refuge for Theo's heart. He stayed, not as a guest, but as a partner, learning to bake bread by feel, its dough yielding under his hands like clay. He planted herbs in the garden, the soil a quiet teacher, and joined Mara in her shed, shaping pots with growing confidence. Together, they transformed the shed into Clay Haven, a workshop where local children crafted pottery toys, tiny cups, animal figures, houses with crooked roofs. The kids' laughter filled the clearing, their small hands guided by Theo's, his patience a gift he hadn't known he possessed. At night, Theo lay under the cabin's quilt, the clay clover on the table beside him, its presence a reminder of the life he was building. The city's pull had faded, its demands no match for the rhythm of this place. Mara's steady gaze, the wheels hum, the earth's heartbeat. He thought of the pendant, now safe in the clay box, and of the ring he'd one day craft, a promise etched in clay, fired strong. The mountains held them, their secret safe, and as sleep claimed him, Theo knew he'd found not just refuge, but home, a step closer to the love that would soon bind them forever. The mountain air was warm with the breath of summer, the pines around Mara Hale's cabin whispering secrets to the stars above. Theodore Langston stood on the porch, the clay clover from Mara's shed a quiet weight in his pocket, its grooves worn smooth by his touch. Weeks had passed since he'd left the city, trading glass towers for the rhythm of this place, baking bread, planting herbs, shaping pots beside Mara. Clay Haven, their workshop, thrummed with life, its shelves lined with children's creations, the clearing alive with laughter and the scent of wildflowers. The four-leaf clover pendant, returned in Mara's hand-glazed box, hung against Theo's chest, a tether to his mother and the man he was becoming. Mara's steady presence had reshaped him, her care a kiln firing his heart to something stronger, truer. Tonight, under a sky ablaze with light, he felt the weight of a choice, one that would bind them forever. Inside, Mara sat by the fire, sketching patterns for a new set of bowls, her dark hair loose, catching the flame's glow. Theo watched her, the curve of her hand mirroring the grace he'd first seen in her pottery shed. Clay Haven had grown beyond their dreams. Children came on weekends, their small hands shaping clay under Mara's guidance, while Theo taught them to carve simple designs, his patience a gift honed by this place. The garden bloomed with basil and lavender, a swing hung from a pine, and a play area of logs and ropes echoed with joy. Neighbors dropped by, bringing jam or stories, weaving a community Theo had never known. He'd emailed his board, extending his leave indefinitely, and the city's hum had faded, drowned by the mountain's song. Theo stepped outside, the evening breeze carrying the scent of rosemary from their garden. He reached into his pocket, fingers brushing a small clay box he'd crafted in secret, its surface etched with delicate swirls, a labor of weeks in Mara's kiln. Inside was a ring, fired to unbreakable strength, a single, four-leaf clover carved into its band, a nod to the pendant, to his mother, to the luck that had brought him here. His heart pounded, not with the fear of boardrooms, but with the raw hope of love. He glanced at Mara through the window, her head bent over her sketch, and knew the moment had come. He re-entered the cabin, the fire's warmth wrapping around him. Mara looked up, her hazel eyes bright with curiosity. "You're plotting something," she teased, setting her pencil down. Theo grinned, nerves dancing under his skin, and knelt before her, the clay box hidden behind his back. "Mara," he began, voice low, trembling just slightly. "You saw me when I was lost, when I thought wealth was all I had. You showed me what it means to live, to love, to be real." He brought the box forward, its simplicity a mirror of their life. Mara's breath caught, her hands rising to her mouth as he opened it, revealing the ring, its clover glinting in the firelight. "Will you be my clay?" he asked, the words strange yet perfect, a vow shaped by their shared world. Mara laughed, a shaky sound through tears, her eyes shining. "That's the most beautiful, ridiculous thing anyone's ever said," she whispered, then nodded, voice soft. "Yes." Theo slipped the ring onto her finger, its fit perfect, and pulled her into his arms, their laughter mingling with the fire's crackle. The moment was theirs, unadorned by luxury, yet richer than any gem he'd ever sold. Their wedding came on a golden autumn day, in a meadow ringed by wildflowers, daisies, clover, lavender swaying in the breeze. No chandeliers, no orchestras, just the rustle of leaves and the hum of community. Mara walked barefoot, a soft white knit dress brushing her ankles. Her bouquet a cluster of flowers Theo had gathered at dawn. Her hair was loose, held by a clay pin Theo had shaped, its clover design echoing her ring. Children from Clay Haven tossed petals, giggling, while neighbors and a few friends clapped, their faces warm with shared joy. Theo's father, once distant, stood beside him, his eyes misty as he pressed the four-leaf clover pendant into Theo's hand, a silent blessing. Theo wore it proudly, its weight a promise kept. They exchanged rings, both crafted from Mara's clay, fired in her kiln, their clovers a quiet vow. Theo looked into Mara's eyes, his voice steady despite the emotion rising. "You're my story," he said, slipping the ring on her finger. Mara smiled, her hand trembling. "And you're mine." The crowd cheered, leaves swirling in the air, and Theo kissed her, the world fading to the warmth of her lips, the earth beneath their feet. A year later, Clay Haven thrived, its workshop a beacon for the community. Theo guided a boy's hands on the pottery wheel, shaping a tiny house, while Mara taught a girl to glaze a cup, her laughter ringing like chimes. The garden hugged the cabin, a swing swayed under the pines, and a reading nook overflowed with books and pillows. A child tugged Theo's sleeve, pointing at Mara. "Who's she?" he asked. Theo's gaze softened. "That's Mara," he said, "the woman who saw me when I was lost." Their love, fired strong in the quiet of these mountains, needed no headlines. Tabloids chased other stories, but here, Theo and Mara built something rare, connection carved slowly, polished by truth. They sat on the porch at dusk, Mara's head on Theo's shoulder, their hands entwined, the clay rings catching the last light. "We're real," Mara whispered, her voice a soft echo of their vows. Theo nodded, his thumb brushing her knuckles. "Always." The stars above burned brighter, the forest's song a lullaby for their shared life. Clay Haven stood as a testament to their love, its doors open to all who sought joy in creation. Theo thought of the pendant, safe in its clay box, and the ring on Mara's finger, symbols of a journey from the cliff's edge to this moment. No wealth could rival the peace he'd found. No deal could match the worth of her heart. In this quiet corner, they'd shaped a love that would endure, a story etched in clay, fired to last forever. As the firelight fades from Theo and Mara's story, we hope their journey has touched your heart, reminding us that love, shaped with patience, can transform even the hardest moments. What did this tale stir in you? Share your thoughts in the comments. Tell us what moved you or where you're listening from. Your voices weave this community together, and we're so grateful for every one of you joining us in these quiet corners of the soul. Thank you for being here, for letting these stories bloom in your hearts. Until our next tale, keep seeking the beauty in the simple, the real, the true. We'll meet again soon, under the same starry sky, for another story that might just change the way you see the world. Stay inspired, and see you next time.